Welcome to Non-Consensus Investing. I'm Ram Alawalia, your host and CIO at Lumina Wealth, where we specialize in the craft of alternative investments. At Lumina, we help guide clients through the intricacies of managing wealth so they don't have to shoulder the burden alone. Through this podcast, we draw back the curtain to reveal the strategies employed by the best in the business for their clients so that you too can invest beyond the ordinary. So pleased to welcome to Lumina Non-Consensus Investing, my friend Michael Frick. We've had Michael on several times. I think you might have the record, Michael. So
I'm honored.
Congratulations. When I first met Michael, it was at a Howard's event. We're having dinner, and then we had a 1 hour chat, became a 2 hour chat, then a 5 hour chat. Somewhere in the middle, there was just a crowd of 20 people trying to make sense of the future and unpack Michael's brain. And then we talked again for another 2 hours after everyone left. So you could see the entire S curve from little interest to the hot ball of liquidity, max FOMO, and then on the other side of it. And we've stayed in touch since then. It's always a lot of fun.
It was a wonderful conversation, very mutual and awesome discussion. Happy to carry it on.
For those that don't know, Michael was leading Goldman Sachs internet analyst in the late 90s. So I've seen the cycles. He knows the players and the companies that are involved in this transformation of AI. He writes a daily Substack that really covers the category well. He's listening to the CEOs of, say, Google Cloud or Amazon, going a cut deeper than the rest, looking at policy, looking at energy. And at Lumina, we're generalists. We're trying to find the right themes and stay on top of the themes. We believe AI and data center is a secular trend, and we try to identify the right subject matter experts in those themes. You can only focus your attention a finite number of areas and directions. So Michael's one of those areas and directions. So Michael, welcome. Happy New Year. How have you been?
Good. And Happy New Year to you and everybody listening. And the year is off with a bang as far as AI is concerned. So
it is. I'm relieved that we've had 3 back-to-back weeks with 1 day off in the middle, just so markets can cool off. You and I were talking ahead of the show how there's so much velocity of news and information. And we've got quite a few topics. I'm going to just identify the topics for the audience and we'll get right into it. One is we're going to talk about Jensen's talk at the CES conference this Monday. They're investing both in not just digital AI, but physical AI. We'll talk about Elon Musk and what he's doing there with not just driverless cars and autonomy, but also Neuralink. Google is bringing Gemini AI to TV sets. Meta has replaced 40,000 truth checkers. So US and China are in an AI space race. We've got the cloud wars. We've got custom silicon led by Broadcom that looks like they're going after some of NVIDIA's market share. We've got some policy conversations around data stacks, new AI and cryptos are. What are the implications? Data center and energy. All right, Microsoft said they want to spend $80 billion on data centers this year. Who are the beneficiaries, winners and non-obvious winners? And there's a lot. We'll see if we can cover all that ground, but those are some of the topics that we wanted to get into. And so, Michael, let's start out. What are some of the highlights from Jensen's presentation at the CES conference?
I've been watching Jensen's keynotes as you have, for a very long time. And I think this one at CES 2025 was at least 3 keynotes smushed into one. There was so much that they unleashed. And I think it's worth, even for the casual observer, to at least watch at least a compilation video, 12, 15 minutes, that's available on YouTube to get a sense of it. There's a lot of technology he's just throwing out there, but the broad theme is that he is at a $3.5 trillion valuation. I'm not suggesting that he's doing this for his valuation, but for the investors who obviously, people like you and me who've been longtime investors, et cetera, and we understand the long-term roadmap that he's executing. But for a lot of investors with a 200% performance over the last year, 2 years, the question is everything that's ahead is baked into the stock or not? And certainly they have 80, 90% market share in the large language model AI market for data centers. Anyone who does anything with AI needs their GPU chips. And the GPU chips are moving very rapidly every year in terms of surpassing Moore's law in terms of performance. Instead of 2x, it's 3, 4, 5, 10x, depending on whether you're doing training or inference or synthetic data or distillation, chain of thought, all of these buzzwords that we'll go into a little bit later. But these are very rapidly improving innovations of what you do with these huge clusters of GPUs. And there, Jensen has a relative lock, not just with his hardware, but with CUDA software, which is not just a monolithic piece of software. It's dozens of libraries for every vertical that literally millions of developers building all kinds of applications up in the sixth box of my AI tech stack that I talk about a lot. It's on my Substack a lot, and we can put it up there later. And by the way, I recently updated it for some of these things. So the point being that he has 70, 80, 90% share, depending on which category we're talking about on that. What he did at CES was identify a new segment, which he's been talking about, but he's calling it the physical AI market. In other words, think about, he's basically saying, look, we have this great position and moat in digital AI, but we have a big opportunity in what's called the physical AI, which is basically taking all these language model generative AI technologies and applying it to the physical world. And he identified two big buckets: automobiles, self-driving cars, and robots. Coincidentally, those are the two areas that Elon Musk has been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years. Robotaxis, he did a big show. Elon did a big show last fall. He also had a big party where he had half a dozen Optimus robots come out, all operated by humans in the back, and so on. And so the core thing that he announced, which was very different than what Tesla did and has done to date, is he identified specific pieces of Blackwell-based chips for each of the segments and a lot of the software libraries that anyone, you and I, can start a startup in automobiles or in robotics and literally use that open source stuff or buy his chips, which are going into production. They're not fictional. They're going into production in volume that we can get. Thor for automobiles, Cosmos for foundation model that has physics built in, so you can create huge amounts of synthetic data. I'm getting into the weeds here. But the point is that over the next 2 to 3 years, he can rightfully point that these two big markets are going to be worth tens of billions and then eventually hundreds of billions of dollars. Meaning, and I'm talking about a time frame that's 5 to 10 years. So this is not like quantum computing, which is 20, 30 years. This is relatively real. And the reason it's important to highlight is that even though Jensen is very closely allied with Elon and Tesla, and they're very close frenemies, this CES basically officially made both of them frenemies. You follow? And what I'm saying here is just like Nvidia competes directly with Google and Meta, and less Meta, but Microsoft and others who are building their own chips, Tesla is doing the same. And yet Tesla is also one of his biggest customers for Nvidia GPUs, the Blackwells. And Elon has gone out of his way to praise Elon's capability to build 100,000 plus GPU clusters in Tennessee. And this was very meaningful. The last thing I'll say that Jensen announced that was very important, I've been talking a lot about local AI inference-based technologies. There are a lot of the processing for AI in the next 3 to 5 years are going to be done not only on the big data centers, but locally on your local machines and so on. And so in that context, he announced some very exciting things like Digits, which is a Mac mini style computer that literally is a supercomputer that you're going to be able to buy starting in May for about $3,000, that has the entire NVIDIA technology, hardware and software stack with Blackwell capabilities that is compatible with their cloud stuff, their auto stuff, et cetera. It basically, you can create applications that work across that. Those are very specific things that are very exciting for millions, if not tens of millions of developers in almost every vertical to create entirely different categories of products and services with AI that I think relatively cements NVIDIA's position within the AI infrastructure piece beyond just data center applications, which is what we've been thinking about it for the last couple of years.
So we're talking about Tesla and Nvidia is on a collision course, right? Tesla, we'll come back to them in a sec, but Jensen was talking about robotics, EVs, and then there's like now classic LLM.
They're directly, on a path that are going to overlap.
One of the things that Jensen shared also was, and I'll share my screen here and we can play one of these live clips, because as you pointed out, there's a lot of dense information there, is the timing of all this, right? So Elon said, we'll see human mass production within 3 to 4 years. There'll be a ratio of humanoids to humans of 3 to 5 to 1. And then meanwhile, you've got well, he didn't elaborate the time frame on that latter part, by the way. He just said humanoids will be on the scene in a few years. And then you've got Jensen and NVIDIA, who's creating this open source architecture for anyone to build on top of. And they're announcing deals with automakers. Let's double click on the automotive side and we'll get into the human.
Again, from a Wall Street perspective, I just want to highlight this. Elon has been very proactive. He's extraordinary in terms of marketing and being forward in terms of identifying the opportunity sets. And for the last 2 or 3 years, he's talked about robotics with Optimus, starting with a human in a robot suit 3 years ago. And he's talking about the projections you're talking about. And then he had the robotaxi event. The market has obviously been very enthusiastic about this. And so you've seen Tesla's valuation go from 700 billion to almost a 1.5 trillion. And now it's about 1.2, 1.3. Barron's had a great piece last Sunday, and I wrote about it in my Substack on Sunday, where they took the top 7, 8, and 9 companies that are in the US that are over $1 billion and did PEG ratios on them. NVIDIA, ironically, even with the outperformance, is a PEG ratio of about 0.6. And everyone else, Google, Microsoft, et cetera, is in the 1-2 range in the middle. And Tesla is the outlier at 3.2. And over half of that valuation pump, that 6, 7, 800 million, if you look at the formal Wall Street analysis from the top firms, it's on the excitement over markets like robotaxi and humanoid robots, et cetera, which they're basically giving today several $100 billion of valuation to Tesla in the public markets, okay, relative to, and when you look at what announced, if you just take his 0.6 multiple and give that kind of a opportunity for NVIDIA, because they actually now, with everything that they announced at CES, they will have actual hardware, actual software, open source, that you'll be able to buy, build stuff. And as you said, he announced major deals with almost every automaker. Toyota was the big highlight for me because it's the largest car producer in the world, kind of pari passu with BYD in China. So they're neck and neck. My point being, if you give even a 2.5, 3 PEG ratio, NVIDIA today, just like Tesla's got, that's a $10 trillion market cap. NVIDIA. I'm not saying NVIDIA is going to go there. I'm just saying this is the reality of our markets in the first quarter of 2025. A lot of excitement on robots and cars. Tesla gets the majority of it. NVIDIA is just pointing and saying, hey, just like Babe Ruth, we're going there.
Yes. Yeah. Tesla's getting credit for it now in public markets. Paid full already. The down payments are made by public markets. You can't get another down payment if the payments are made, by the way. NVIDIA hasn't. By another fun fact on the PEG ratio, which is a very good metric to use for growth stocks, and it's really popularized by Peter Lynch. So you mentioned the FY1 PEG ratio, which is next 12 months PEG ratio. It's 0.6 or 0.9, depending on which consensus analyst estimates you're using. Either way, it's less than 1. The lower the number, the better.
Thank you.
Ratio compares as the PE ratio divided by the earnings growth rate. So it's not enough to look at PE in isolation, because if you have a higher growth rate, you're willing to pay a higher multiple for that earnings stream. The FY2 PEG ratio, get this, is 0.3, which is dirt cheap. So absurdly, all NVIDIA has to do is meet consensus expectation. Now, I'm all about non-consensus investing. However, there are certain times when you see an obvious trend. This is one of those trends. This is one of those times where even if the analysts are over optimistic by 20%, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now, what's interesting about what happened, and I wrote that post this week about the FY2 PEG ratio of NVIDIA at 0.3. NVIDIA, in my mind, is actually value stock. It's a value stock. What do you look at?
You could argue it totally.
Now, we'll come back to Toyota in a second, but I just want to share this with folks that are listening, because they're probably confused around, hey, what happened with the NVIDIA stock price? But Monday morning, there was a major gap up. I'm going to share my screen there. And one of the things you learn about markets is don't chase gap ups, especially Monday morning gap ups, the worst.
Yep.
And by the way,
market don't open first.
So what happened over the weekend is you have at-home investors reading an article and they say, all right, buy, market order, go. And then Monday morning, there's an auction and the market makers see a buy wall coming, and they're going to cause a gap up to find a clearing price to fulfill that. And so the market makers are going to sell. They're selling there by selling short, by the way. They've got a quick liquidity, source out liquidity somehow. And then after the auction is done, the price will move lower. And that's what happened. By the way, the inverse is also a good idea. On August 7th, there's a 2% gap down in the market. What happened that weekend is at-home investors were panic selling, market sell. The market makers do the opposite. They tell we clear this market at a lower price. When the selling impulse is gone, markets recover. So anyway, it's just a quick kind of technical exposition there. So if we go take a look, Jensen is saying around auto. We'll play this clip, and I'd love to get your reactions, Michael. Let me turn up the volume here.
Be robots. As if we could accelerate the development of artificial intelligence for AVs and for robotics, it brings in a lot of business for us, of course. The autonomous vehicle industry and
But he's previewing the economic opportunity around this. He's taking picks and shovels play. It reminds me almost of like the Wintel duopoly from the 90s, right? You had the Clone Wars, the proliferation of PCs led by Windows on the software side and Intel versus Apple, which had the hardware and software and the focus on the user experience. And now Tesla is in the position of Apple back then, deliver a premium experience. You could poke holes in a second, right? Deliver premium integrated experience, software and hardware. And then NVIDIA is playing the picks and shovels role, except NVIDIA is both on the software and the hardware layer because they have CUDA. And it's just strange bedfellows because Tesla needs the NVIDIA GPUs. And there's another clip where Jensen is praising Elon for his leadership in automotive. I mean, it's really strange bedfellows.
Frenemies. They're frenemies. They're officially frenemies. I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate your point about Tesla. I'm a fan for a long time for the cars. And I know Apple. I'm going back to the old line. I've known Apple from the very beginning and Steve Jobs and so on directly. And I'm sorry, Tesla is no Apple. Their products, I think on the cars, they've done a brilliant job of the auto buyers around the world for almost a decade and a half that we'll sell you the same model for 6-7 years with no improvements, zero. Maybe, and we're going to tell you we're going to update it with software, which they've been doing obviously every year, but it's minimizing. So my point on, first of all, I just want to touch on that Apple Tesla thing, but I couldn't agree more with your Wintel thing on the NVIDIA side. And then I would argue, and I've written a post about this, NVIDIA right now is essentially Wintel in one company. It's just that the software piece has been overturned. All their software is open source. In Wintel, the majority of the revenues and margins and profits went to Microsoft, Windows, and Office. With Intel, we got some of it, but much smaller, and Intel is where it is today, being sold for parts. NVIDIA starts with hardware on the data center. Now it's moving extraordinarily fast, hundreds of millions of units of chips that are going to go into cars and robots and on your desktop, literally over the next 3 years. And it'll probably take 20-30% or more of the AI training and inference compute off the data centers. And this touches on a topic that we're supposed to be talking about later on data centers and power and energy. And NVIDIA is just starting to start that move.
Yeah.
And there is no semiconductor company that can touch this. No, there's nobody out there today, including in China.
2 or 3 layers are impacted. I think like one lesson from the Wintel wars is that whoever owns the end customer relationship captures a lion's share of the margin. And Windows, through the OEM installation, the Dells of the world, which pre-install Windows, they had the ability to capture the lion's share of the economics. And then the Dells of the world had to compete with Gateway Computers and HP and Compaq, and that became a commodity business. Tesla does own the end customer here, which is an advantage they have. NVIDIA is intermediated by cloud providers. However, the software developers want to use CUDA. And I'll pose you this question. You have Google, Google's cloud business is growing quickly. They're growing faster than their peer group, but they have custom silicon. Why can't Google develop an alternative to CUDA and reverse engineer the language to make the transition from NVIDIA CUDA to Google custom silicon?
That's not their bread and butter. Google is every company, each one of us individual. We wake up in the morning, there's 2 or 3 things we do. Google at its core is about Google services for 3, 4, 5 billion people. Okay. Majority of the efforts, their cycles, et cetera, are spent on that, despite all the things that they're doing with DeepMind, with Google Cloud, which is their company that competes against Azure, Microsoft Azure, and with AWS. But AWS, that's all they do. Google with TPU, they are the singular biggest competitor on a processor basis to NVIDIA. but majority of that is being used for their own
Right.
applications.
They're not in the end market with NVIDIA.
No, they're not competing in the end market, and they have to go and get their share of NVIDIA's. Why? Because for Google Cloud, because Tom Kurian, who runs Google Cloud, needs as many NVIDIA GPUs as possible because he's got businesses knocking on his door saying, we don't want to use TPU. Even if Google tomorrow were able to create with their engineers a CUDA equivalent, which they can't, by the way, because it's not a press a button and you do it in three months. These CUDA, the set of libraries, it's taken 10 to 15 years and it's an iterative process. You can't just press a button and do a Manhattan project to create CUDA. It's not a monolithic thing. It's whole sets of libraries across so many things. And there is no real money in it for Google right now on to do that. They're going to do some of it. They're going to create CUDA equivalents for TPU for some of the places where they want customers to use their TPU infrastructure. But right now, this is not a zero-sum game for all of these players. There's so much demand for training, inference, all of these things we're talking about, that these are not competitive things. The market wants to think about, oh, what if all the top customers of NVIDIA are going to create their own processors? Ain't happening. All the own processors that all these companies are creating, majority of them are going to go for their own internal applications and not necessarily overlap with customers asking for their proprietary solutions versus NVIDIA solutions, because the NVIDIA solutions are the Wintel, what you just described. There is a horizontal operating system, and if you're building apps on that, you want to just build it on top of Windows. And that's the difference. So there may be some overlap and competition, but it's a non-issue for the next 3 years.
For the next 3 years, I think something worth in beyond the next 3 years, though. I think your whole point stands is that Google has other priorities versus NVIDIA, and Google's end customers want NVIDIA, CUDA, to go build their apps.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch on something you said earlier about Tesla owning their customers. I just want to, again, make sure people understand. Tesla has 2.5 million cars, 3 million, let's say, in the next year. Okay. The world market for cars, 30, 40, 50 million, depending on if you include China or not, year. Okay. Tesla is nowhere close to Apple in terms of 2-3 billion people who are using from an end customer control point of view. There is nothing like that. Tesla is a relatively niche auto producer, and they're getting more niche by the day. With what you're seeing if you look at non-US markets, BYD, etc., Tesla is losing share. They're super hard pressed to produce their cars at the scale. They're really killing themselves to build a $20,000, $30,000 model in addition to the robotaxis. And by the way, we haven't talked about this, but the US-China competition that's going on, US has been going out of its way to say, hey, you can't have access to all the AI GPUs from NVIDIA and all these places. Guess what? Majority of the battery technology leadership is in China. And China just this week said, you can't have access to our battery technology. And Tesla is caught in the crosshairs right now. And Elon is going to have to use his new Washington connections to thread a road for Tesla in China to get access to the battery technology for the rest of the world. There are huge chess games within chess games that are going on here. So these are not binary questions. And in that world, what NVIDIA did with a horizontal automotive platform for AI driving with Thor chips, etc., and deals with Toyota, deals with almost every major auto company in the world using their AI hardware and software, NVIDIA is in a much more Wintel type of position in automobile AI, physical AI. And I would argue the same thing for robots, which are much further down on the development cycle. They're much, much earlier, just to be clear. But there's a lot of money and investment to be made in all of these areas. And that's why the picks and shovels, NVIDIA is a near-term position in those coming markets that are going to be worth billions and trillions.
The EVs are the inevitable, but the legacy ICE manufacturers are going to rely on some kind of picks and shovels solution. Now, it could be Tesla, but they haven't signed up for that offering yet.
If I'm an ICE manufacturer, and like GM and Ford and everyone, and they're all stepping back from pure EVs to hybrid and so on, and if I still want all the AI features in my car, I can now buy Thor chips from NVIDIA, put them in my ICE cars. I've always found it very strange that self-driving and et cetera has typically been associated only with EVs. There's no reason for that. 60, 70, 80% of the cars on the planet are ICE, internal combustion engines. And hybrids are the most popular segment right now worldwide. That's basically a majority a combustion engine with a small battery in it.
Preference that consumers have.
Exactly. And Tesla's never going to do ICE. They're not going to do a combustion engine. They're going to put, and Tesla has their own chips, by the way, and own software, just like Google has TPUs for their own applications. They may or may not use Thor. I'd be extraordinarily surprised if they would use NVIDIA's solutions in their cars. But it's an opportunity for everybody else, which is the majority.
You have a channel conflict also, right? Like the GMs of the world don't want to rely on white label technology of a competitor in the end market.
That is always absolutely the case. When GM is, the CEO of GM is being asked about how they're competing with Tesla, yeah, they're not going to use anything of Tesla's. You're right.
That's right. Now, let me challenge you one point. You said, hey, look, Apple's got far more reach than Tesla. Tesla's in a niche market. They've got 2 million customers. Apple's got billions. But Tesla has retail distribution in dealerships. Apple does as well, but you can't sell a car. Maybe you can. I guess you can have like a car in the middle of the showroom that push a few buttons on your phone, have it delivered to your door, I suppose. Car Guru or Carvana or something. Tell me more. Go ahead.
Apples and oranges. I'm sorry to use the pun. Tesla does not have that many dealerships. Their brilliance was a direct order. I can buy a Tesla right now like I used to buy Dell computers 15 years ago. Configure online and the thing gets delivered to me. When I have a problem, I call or I go online and a truck comes and tries to fix it or takes it away to a regional mega dealership where they fix it. And then there are these little showrooms in my mall where I see a couple of Tesla cars and I sit in them, and that's it. That's not an Apple store. And by the way, and so I think that the distribution is a big piece of it. Difference there.
Is having the dealers relevant? Apple doesn't have it either. Tesla.
Yeah, the only reason in the US we have dealerships, Ram, is because it's legislatively baked in locally and at a state level. The dealerships have huge political power locally and at the state level. And in Texas, for instance, where I'm sitting right now, I can't get a Tesla delivered direct here. If I have to get it shipped it has to be shipped to an adjacent state, and then they ship it to me on a Tesla's nickel over here, because the dealers in Texas have huge political power, and they're not going to let direct distribution happen.
Your kind of higher level point is, look, Apple's got more reach. They've got billions of customers. Obviously, Apple's not in the EV game. They abandoned that project. Tesla has 2 million, but isn't the relevant consideration that Tesla's number one in recall? And you can download an app, you can make an order. Is this a point of distinction that's relevant in the modern age of an economy? You want something delivered to your door, go online, push a few buttons, and I guess ship.
No, I give Tesla huge credit and kudos for creating just like I do on their charging network. They've done brilliant work on that. But Elon being Elon, he fired the core people around the charging network. Who knows what he'll do on the retail distribution? You're totally right. The fact that I can order a car and get it delivered, a Tesla, it's just amazing. It's magical. But that's being emulated to a certain extent by most of the others like Rivian, et cetera. Apple is not even in the car game. So they were literally apples and oranges here on that basis. And then cut off their retail distribution. GM tried, Ford tried. But
the key is it's not a moat.
Again?
The key is that it's not a moat. That's the key thing. If you can
moat for.
Go ahead. It's not a moat. Having distribution doesn't necessarily give you an advantage in the digital on the map.
Retail distribution is more an anchor than a helping factor. And every car company knows it. Ford CEO has been very vocal about this, but his hands are relatively tied. Overseas, the markets are much more akin to what we have here because they don't necessarily have that dealer legislative lock in places like Europe and so on. Depends on which country, because Europe is not a singular market country-wise. And then you got China, it has its own thing. China is 30% EV. It's the highest penetration out there, just on a separate thing.
It is amazing how both Tesla and NVIDIA are the most geopolitically bound companies that we can think about, right? Tesla has an interest in opening up the China market, but they're losing ground in the China market to players like BYD who have better, lower cost battery technology and better products.
It's crushing them. If I was in China, if I was living in Shanghai, there's no reason why I would buy a Tesla. There are the cars. I can buy a BYD starting at $8,000-9,000 USD versus the cheapest on a Tesla I've checked. It's 35,000, plus thousand, and everything you're talking about is much better on the UI.
If you're Elon, what's your optimal strategy? On the one hand, you want tariffs for sure. You don't want China EV competition. You might say, look, if I get tariffs and the retaliatory tariffs that limit Elon's ability to grow in China, that maybe the strategy is abandon that market. That might be how this plays out. They lose on share in China, but they can potentially dominate the US market.
Rob, your question is an awesome question. If Elon was a regular CEO, that he was a CEO of one single company, but he is a CEO of 6 or 7 companies. Right now, he's co-CEO of America, and he's playing several other games that are far bigger to him and more important.
Literally playing video games. Apparently, he's like number one
in Diablo. I totally, and I don't know how he does it, because when I play, I stopped playing video games because I can't afford spending 2-3 days to even get to level 15. He's at level 120 plus. No, hats off. He can do that. Totally right. But my point is on your question about Elon and Tesla, he's also, look, if you're just focusing on a CEO of Tesla, you would not be interfering in German politics and UK politics right now, and politics, and where majority of his European traction on Tesla sales are in those markets. Okay. And even if 20-30% of the people in those countries buy Teslas, the other 60-70% are not. So watch Tesla sales in those markets in the next 18 months. If I'm a Tesla shareholder, I've got to be worried about that. They're going to be down 20-30%. He is not optimizing for CEO of Tesla. He's optimizing for CEO of Elon Musk and his aspiration. Say again?
It's an excellent observation, right? If he's supporting political parties that aren't likely to win in Europe, the retaliation, what that means for being able to access European markets and retaliatory tariffs won't help him. Now, on the other hand,
I'm not even touching on official retaliation. I'm just saying regular people who want consumer identity. Okay. If Tim Cook basically tomorrow starts to favor one type of politics, I don't care which one, or politics or the other, that is going to impact how people think about Apple in the world. Same thing, forget tech. Same thing with Coke or Pepsi or Pizza Hut or McDonald's. It's the same thing. I'm talking about emotional connection of brands at that level. And Tesla is an extraordinary brand. What he's done, oh my God, he created a world-class brand leadership with no marketing. He's the only car company with zero advertising dollars, no marketing. Hats off. It's awesome. But it's based on 200 million followers of Elon Musk and his extraordinary mastery of social media over 15 years that has made Tesla the ultimate mega mother of all meme stocks in an article.
If you play it out, really the end game for him will be own the American market as long as he possibly can, which really just puts him up in competition.
Elon is, you and I would agree, he's an extraordinary entrepreneur, extraordinary company builder. I will say what he's doing, he is crazy like a fox with the government thing. It's government capture. If his ambition, if he's really true that we want to go to Mars, we want to have major space launches, because there's also SpaceX and Starlink. Okay. Those things, look, he got huge subsidies that made those businesses what they are today. Now he needs to take it to the next level. He needs major global policies that are coordinated at the government to government level, which is what his government capture efforts going on right now are for. In that sense, what he's doing makes 100% sense, but it's far.
So let me play it back to, if you look at the totality of Elon's portfolio, including SpaceX and Starlink, if he can influence American power and open markets in those other categories, then it can
using the executive branch.
So I think that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot. Like he's brokering like peace treaties with Ukraine now. He's doing a lot of things. China is not using Starlink. It's prohibited there. If he takes an L on Tesla, he might get a win on Starlink.
But the flip of it is that what happens is when you politicize these big platforms, it accelerates everybody else. So guess what? EU said, we're going to put whatever it takes, billions of dollars to build our own Starlink. They're starting. Okay. And it'll cost them much more. But guess what? 30 years ago, Europe said, we want an alternative to Boeing, and they created Airbus. Okay. Yeah. And it's a 50-50. China's doing the same thing. Sorry. And India's doing the same thing. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. By the way, briefly on Starlink, then we can move on to the second pillar, the humanoids. So, the other companies in the satellite space, here's Iridium, right? This was launched by Craig McCaw. Late 90s also was losing a bunch of money. Now this company's out there in public markets. They're making money. I don't know this, by the way, but it's on my radar. This is a cheap way to get exposure to something like Starlink.
Yeah, I remember it was at Goldman when we were involved with Iridium way back when.
If you remember, as it was a hot stock then too. It's very hot stock. It was the hottest of stocks.
No, as hot as Starlink. Believe it, if you can believe it. I was there. Yeah.
When you have this like satellite phone that would be like a foot long with a massive antenna.
I had one of those.
Had one of those. What was your use case? You're like on a boat in the middle of the ocean?
It didn't matter. I just needed one. I'm going to get 2 or 3 of Jensen's digits, $3,000 per, because who doesn't want to put a whole Llama 400 billion parameter model on your desktop under your screen? I want it. Absolutely.
Right. Fascinating.
Just on the satellite thing, I just want to highlight 2 more things because Apple just did a satellite deal. I just want to highlight it's one of the other global star, I think it is. And then let's not forget Amazon. Jeff Bezos is specifically focused on their Kuiper. I don't know how to exactly pronounce it. Their Starlink equivalent, which is far behind. But in the next 5 years, we're going to see 3 to 4, 5 networks for low orbit data satellite stuff. So Starlink, as amazing as it is today, their hardware, software, Elon totally crushes it, just like he did with Tesla years ago. Showed the world what is possible. Competition's coming. So if I was buying Starlink in the public markets, let's say an X period of time, this year or next, I have to consider that in the next 5 years, there's going to be 3 or 4 entities that are going to be involved.
There's an expression. It's called the pioneers. You can always see them because they're up top of the hill and they get the arrows in their back. It's a classic.
But I want to give Elon full credit. Starlink is extraordinary. What he's done, he just launched 20 more yesterday or 2 days ago with SpaceX. Just amazing.
So Amazon's focused on space and the way they'll deliver into the market. They can use Blue Origin, although I think they have other efforts to have payload delivery into space as well. Can you double click on Starlink? You said that they announced recently.
Yeah, it was not. I don't believe it was Starlink. It was global. We can Google it. It was one of the other satellites that has not quite the same quality or type of capabilities. But Apple is very focused in the next 2 to 3 years to have their phones do much more than the emergency satellite access or SOS type of stuff that we can do with the 16. By iPhones 18 or so, it's going to have capability to do satellite in remote areas and in every area for regular internet. And as these competing networks come about, Apple's going to have the same opportunity to build network connectivity in their modems to all of that stuff. By the way, just remember, when it came out in 2007, it only worked on one network, for a couple of years. And now it works with over 200 networks around the planet. And Apple's basically focused on exactly that opportunity for satellite data communication. Yeah. Today, Starlink is the big gorilla, but in the next 5 years, there are going to be a number of options and alternatives because this low orbit thing works. And the problem has been launching these things in big numbers, and Elon have a big advantage right now still.
Yep. So in 2022, Apple invested $1.5 billion in Globalstar, satellite communications company, to support satellite capabilities, to your point, for their devices. It's going to enable emergency SOS via satellite on its iPhone. And Amazon has a project called Project Kuiper, Kuiper. Yes.
This is based on a belt that is between Pluto and Neptune and so on. This the whole asteroid belt. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Right. Planned satellite constellation, providing global broadband coverage. Yes, that would compete with Starlink. And then you've got another player. This is like a hot stock right now called AST Space Mobile. They're developing technology to connect standard mobile phones to satellites, also aiming to offer broadband internet without the need for ground-based cell tower. We'll see how that plays. What's the marginal market that this unlocks, having that capability? I'm not going to sign up for that. I have coverage. Now and then when I drive to upstate New York, the Adirondacks, there's a 15-minute corridor where I don't have coverage.
So right now, if we go from a world that's a few thousand LEO satellites, low Earth orbit satellites, to a world where there's hundreds of thousands of these things. And remember, they degrade very quickly because they're low orbit. There's 5, 10, I forget the number percentage. There's a bunch of them that fall and then you've got to keep launching new ones, etc. But if you go to a world where there's as many as you want up there through all of these providers, and over time, they'll roam and interoperate, assuming the world is not at World War III levels for all the other reasons that we can talk about, then we have a world that it's a long-term threat to the telecom companies. Because remember, Comcast and all these companies they went from being cable companies to broadband companies. Now they're wireless companies, the Verizons and the so on. But their margins are going to shrink. I still resent every time I get an Apple Watch and I want to connect it to my Verizon account, I got to pay them 10, 20, Verizon's charging me $20 a month for this little thing where I barely use the connect. It's an oligopoly. I resent that. Okay. If I have true satellite connectivity with my Apple devices, then maybe I don't pay $50, $100, $200 a month for my phone and one or two gadgets and all of that to connect through a Verizon account or a T-Mobile account in the US, et cetera. And I have far cheaper gigabit speed access.
Right.
That's the opportunity. We're talking about a compression of the telecom industry over a 5 to 10 year period. And that's the benefit. It's a huge consumer surplus for users.
That is very interesting. So in the quest for growth and profits, what you're saying is that these big tech companies are eyeing the telecom industry. It's a big industry. Look at telecom.
No, it looks Starlink. It's being sold as remote access stuff. It was just like Iridium 20, 30 years ago when Goldman took it public and all that. But the point was the market is far bigger than that. The world needs connectivity, period, all the time. And these LEOs have the opportunity to provide that for normal internet access. That's where Apple's going. That's what Apple is seeing. They're seeing the technologies move. When Apple does these kind of partnerships and acquisitions, it's telling me that in the next 3-4 years, they think that we're in a world where your iPhone is not just going to use satellite for emergency messages. It's going to use it for voice. It's going to use it for data. It's going to use for YouTube and mucking around with TikTok, if still legal in the country.
So there's $830 billion of market cap at stake in the telecom industry. If you look at T-Mobile, Verizon, Comcast, some of these other players. Now, the prices really haven't reflected that kind of risk, actually.
No, we will never do it. But this collection it could be a quarter in 4, 5, 6 years of the market cap. This is a long-term macro hedge fund pair trade.
When do we see the commercial impact in terms of delivery to the end consumer? You got a lot. You got to get the satellites launched in space, number one. I guess that's the main thing. And once you have that, you have to distribute.
So right now, the Starlink product is, again, Elon's done a brilliant job of taking these big dishes. I used to have one, and now the latest one is about the size, a little bit bigger than a big laptop, which is cool. The magic starts to happen when you don't need that dish at all. And that's probably 2 to 3 years. There are chipsets being developed.
I don't want a dish in my backyard.
No, in other words, today's Starlink is a relatively non-mobile product, but Elon has been very focused on creating mobile versions of that go into your RVs, that go into your airplanes. There's a huge small sub-market where all the carriers, United, Delta in the US and everyone in the world, are replacing their old low bandwidth wireless technologies with these kinds of technologies. So you're still talking about 3, 4, 5 years. And a lot of the stuff is about capabilities that are built into the new satellites that can talk to much smaller receivers that are going to go into devices that are smaller and smaller. And so that's the opportunity.
It is it's incredible how pervasive these big tech companies are in our lives. So many facets of our lives in terms of what we order, getting food delivery, content creation. You've got Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney Media, a lot of the cable. Now it's going to be communication systems. They haven't gone after the banks yet because these antiquated laws don't let them or theirs go after them. That would obviously be the next category that one want to focus on. But it is extraordinary, the ability of these companies to grow, target the next industry, and then get after it.
Yeah, look, you're totally right. Once you start to go down big industries like fintech or financial and healthcare and so on, I've spent 30 years, as you have for a long time, looking at these things. And the reality for those, especially those two industries, the third rail on those things are legislation pieces that are thousands of pieces of legislation that are so intertwined that you cannot unravel them just because AI technology can do GWIS.
Don't bet against Mag 7. And you saw that in the last 2 weeks, there were 3 $1 million contributions to Trump's inauguration campaign. It was Apple, Google, Meta. Tesla didn't have the contribution. He bought Twitter.
No, $250 billion check, and that's done. This was the biggest. Yeah. Everything else is just bringing an apple to your teacher.
It's not just how these big tech companies touch our daily lives, but to the earlier point on the geopolitical connectedness of these companies. and now the domestic political interaction of these companies. And no wonder Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. That's one of the kind of intersections of all these things. And why?
To be fair, Jeff, I don't think when he bought the Washington Post, I really thought, I think because I've known him in his early years in the Amazon thing. I think he really bought it for the reason of Washington Post. He loved the product as you
don't think there's strategic about the ability to own a journal that's read by most people in the Beltway and influence policy?
My sense, because he had a very good personal relationship with the publisher, the Graham. I think it was like you and I investing in a startup or company of a friend. It was one of those. It's evolved much bigger into, and that today's priorities, there's obviously huge political sensitivities, what he had to do on the op-ed piece. I think that kind of evolved into that stuff would be my general read of it. And today's world, as you said, for the Mag 7s or the Batman stocks that I did a post on, they all now have everything we're talking about touches very regulated industries here and everywhere. So politics is now the main filter for all of them. And it's just gone up as exponentially as AI technologies or any Moore's law, etc. The political overlay is reality for everybody, not just in the United States. We just focus on that because that's what we look at every day. But if you look at, I just came back from India, same thing. You want to do anything, you better have given your little donation to the right parties.
Yeah.
And same thing in China. One of the senior economists in China, who China was presenting in Washington, got his wings clipped because he dared to say that Xi's forecast of 5% growth was likely 2 to 3%. This just happened this week. It's a very political world now.
Look, I'd say it's all out in the open. I'd say the world was always political. It's just now it's out in the open. And I like that. I love to live in an ideal world where money and politics didn't mix and influence wasn't linked to money. That's just naive, though. It's just not how the world works, sadly.
Agreed. I agree with you. It's always been political. It's just that to deploy services and products at scale, you need more political help than you ever did.
Include the U.S. government, right? The biggest spenders on Palantir and Amazon. And
that's just on the defense side. It's the mind explodes at the rebuilding of the defense industry. What we're seeing in Ukraine with the drones and the swarm drones and so on is literally like biplanes in World War I figuring out, hey, I can throw little firecrackers on people. And then you fast forward to World War II and we bomb the crap out of each other in London and Dresden.
We'll get to humanoids in a second. I think one major takeaway from this is be careful about betting against Mag 7. These are companies have enormous advantages in capability, technology, the ability to fund new research and lose money. We'll come to DeepSeek later, right? DeepSeek, the LLM built in China.
Love DeepSeek.
$6 million. There's some myth around that. We'll come back to that later, but don't bet against Mag 7. Now pick and choose your spots within there. I'm not in the Apple and Tesla camp on valuation. I'm in the Nvidia Google camp, although all of them have played an extraordinary role in our lives and it's only set to increase.
No, I agree. All the Mag 7, or if you want to now include Batman with Broadcom in there and so on. I agree. I post on all of these things. And by the way, it's not just US. You got to throw in things like ASML in Europe. You got to throw in SK Hynix and for memory and a variety of other things.
Mag 11.
Mag 11, Mag 12. Yeah, or to keep for regular folks, just QQQ.
That's the simplest take home. And you'll be good. Let's talk about humanoids now.
Yes.
Let me see. I think I got a video on humanoids here. And Jensen was talking about this around physical. And I find it so interesting just how Jensen and Elon have to look up these opportunities that pretend to be
in jobs that are workers the world is short of workers and aging population, declining birth rates. And so I think the world needs a lot more workers. Robotics is one of the best ways for us to supplement all of that and help companies recover the lost revenues on the one hand and drive productivity, which reduces inflation for the world on the other hand. And so I think robotics is going to be very important to that in different areas. So you could they'll probably deploy into manufacturing first because they obviously need it most.
Which uses a ginormous potential market, addressable market.
It's a $50 trillion industry that wants to grow.
First off, he's an incredible salesman. He's talking about robotics, but he's leading with, hey, you've got a demographic issue. You need healthcare workers. You need people to take care of the elderly in assisted living facilities. You need people to help with kids, and you've got an inflation problem.
The number of countries in the world, developed and developing, that have a replacement index of 2.1 or less, which is the number of children per woman in a country, it is extraordinary. Even in developing countries, India, etc., they're all state by state. You look at it, it's under 2. We've got, if you look at the next 50 years, you look at the global demographic numbers. We're talking about 8 billion people today, going to maybe 10 billion, and then the forecasts are coming down. I think those are too aggressive, 8 to 10, because of technology providing opportunity for growth in huge countries, in 50 countries plus in Africa. We're going to see it maybe stays at 8.5. So yes, he's totally right. And most social security programs around the world, etc., depending on huge people coming in. This is without the issue of migrants and borders and all the other stuff, right? You were just saying your country has what you need, and reality is you don't. Yes, in that world, what Jensen said, he said it pithily and eloquently. We're going to need machines, humanoid, non-humanoid. For the next 3, 4, 5 years, I'm going to put my money on non-humanoid, then humanoid. And I'll tell you why if we want to go into that. But these machines, just like Roombas were relatively interesting, the most interesting things at CES on the Roomba side are Roombas now with single arm that can pick up shoes and socks and things. So what I'm getting at is we're going to get humanoids in pieces. We're going to get machines with an arm or a couple of legs, or, on the next 3 or 4 years, that'll be $1,000, $2,000. That'll be mostly for early adopters. But my point being, yes, these things are going to augment people. My dad has early dementia, etc. I can't wait. And I right now have a Android phone or iPhone that speaks in Hindi with him through ChatGPT. And it's already useful. In 6 to 12 months, I'm going to get a Siri thing or an Alexa thing that'll do that even better. And there'll be a robot, and we're seeing them that'll literally emote physically, etc. But yeah, the opportunity is totally open-ended. And that's what Elon brilliantly touched on with his Optimus move 3 years ago. The point with NVIDIA, what Jensen is saying is like Elon, he's not saying Elon, but he's saying my solution, NVIDIA, is horizontal. Wintel, again, for this thing. We're going to create, we have created, they actually have hardware chips that are Blackwell based. And then they have Isaac and Groot and all these operating system things that are sub-components of their open source operating system software layer that you can create, anyone can create all kinds of companies on. And so that's why I think that clip is very valuable. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite interesting. I know in a prior podcast, we talked about delivery, and I think the main conclusion there is not anytime soon. It's still years away for mass adoption. Are you still correct to revise that view based on what you've seen recently?
The US-China topic that we have on our agenda. The reality is when you talk about cars, self-driving cars, batteries, humanoid robots, drones, if we're going to get into the defense seed, all of that, for a whole bunch of reasons, over right or wrong, 25 years, China is the place where you can get all the hundreds, if not thousands of components, the machining, all of that stuff. It's not just a fab or a factory. China is the place. Okay. Right now, there is no other central place. I have gone to Vietnam. I've gone to Indonesia. I've gone to India. There is no one central place. It'll take years to build this. US doesn't have it. Okay. You look at Anduril, which is one of the big private hardware software defense companies in the US, Palmer Luckey, who's brilliant on the defense side of the equation. They're creating robotic submarines, robotic airplanes that'll fly with our F-35s, our remote control, etc. To build any of that at scale, Ram, if we want to do it for less than $50, $100 million a piece, we're going to need huge supply chains that do not exist right now. And China has most of it. So I just want to say on robotics, human or otherwise, to build the ecosystems for all the components, and the same thing with autos, there is a lot more work to be done than just building the model, the AI models is what I'm saying, which is what we've done with the physical data centers. And even there's huge heavy lift where we need to spend about $1 trillion to build a whole bunch of AI data centers in the US and Canada and all these other places.
And no one's talking about that.
Everyone is just looking at the headline piece, space race, US, China. There is no space race. In other words, there is a space race. We use the space race with Russia as the analogy, as an enemy. Point is, and everyone says, who's going to win, US versus China? The simple answer from my point of view is both lose. As long as they think about it as a competition, they lose. Okay. The actual opportunities that NVIDIA is talking about, Elon's talking about in terms of the benefits of ever decreasing costs and capabilities of these products are not going to be delivered to users anywhere at the level we can if we do not have global supply chains that work together. Otherwise, China is building their own supply chains at a 50%, 100% more cost, and they're bifurcating the market, which means that in 3 to 5 years, their companies are going to do exactly they did in the auto segment. They're going to go, they may not be able to get into the US or Europe because geopolitical sensitivities, but they're going to sell into 3 to 4 billion people markets that are growing in Latin America, in everywhere in Asia, everywhere that are going to use Chinese operating systems.
There's a trend time, and you can build that manufacturing capability in the US in the same way that Tesla's built their gigafactory. It'll take really Charlie 1 second, but push back 1 second. But you also need the rare earth materials, which are needed for magnets and motors.
Which is why Trump is talking about Greenland.
Exactly. That Greenland brings that back in the fold. So does Canada. Canada's got rare earth materials. But why can't the US build a domestic robotics manufacturing led capability in the same way that Tesla has?
It's not about one gigafactory. It's not about $150 billion fab. You've looked at it.
You looked at more than me.
Thousands of companies around it that are building all the components that go into every piece of it. You look at Airbus. I brought up that example, Airbus versus Boeing. Airbus is not a single factory that builds the dang thing. They got wings happening in Italy. They got the engines happening, the nacelles happening. My wife is a private equity investor. She had a big outcome in a company that just make the lining that had to come from one country, and they had to ship it.
Like ASML relies on a Carl Zeiss. Taiwan Semiconductor relies on KLAC and Applied Materials and Lam Research, and it's a globally distributed supply chain. And Tesla relies on semiconductors, including components from China.
Yeah, we tend to glamorize entrepreneurs because especially of our world of social media, where Elon is the iconic guy who's going to save humanity, go to Mars, etc. I would throw you a name, Fritz Haber. Do you know Fritz Haber?
I don't think I do.
Fritz Haber. Okay, he won the Nobel Prize in 1980 because he created a process to extract ammonia, to create fertilizer through a natural process. It's literally responsible for, in the last 60, 70 years, for feeding billions of people because it made agriculture, it was like the Moore's law of food production. Okay. Right. At the same time, Haber also was the father of mustard gas in World War I. He was of all the poison gas. He also did bad things. He did good things and bad things. Why do I bring him up? No one knows his name. Okay. But he did more impact because Elon talks about humanity has to continue and billions of people have to go to the other outer planets so we can continue. This individual, he wasn't trying to do it, just technology innovation. He and another dude, Bosch, they came up with this process. It changed the world. It allowed the world to go from 2-3 billion people to 8 billion people today. Food production, simple, right? And my point is, the reason I'm bringing up Haber is because if Haber had 200 million followers and a personality, he would be as iconic as Elon today in terms of wanting us to take us to Mars and build SpaceX and Starlink. What I'm getting at is technology is extraordinary. It just, for every Elon, for every Steve Jobs, for every amazing technologist that we revere and adore and look as role models, there are hundreds, if not thousands of technologists and engineers and so on worldwide that are creating extraordinary things, far lower prices, far greater capabilities every single day. And that, by the way, gets us to DeepSeek, which is...
Briefly, what's your use case for your initial humanoid purchase?
Again, I think it's incremental, right? The use case for my buying a $20,000 robot that I can get, I think I'm on the wait list for it, is this, because I'm an early adopter. I buy one of everything. I bought the first robotic robots from Sony, or the iBook series.
So edition 1.0.
Yeah, 1.0. They did a couple of things that barked, cute, etc. There's no use
value.
No, there is no use case.
Curiosity, novelty.
Early adopters. It's early adopters. There is, all right, and here's why. And let's get to your core of your question, which is what Jensen talked about. The data to train these models, robots, it barely exists. They're on, unlike Tesla having 2.5 million cars that trained FSD 12.5, 12.5, 12.6, which is the current camera-based AI generative system. There is no FSD for robots. Where you can train, where there are no cameras around my house that are watching everything I do when I fold clothes, when I cook, etc., for the robot to learn how to do all that. That has to be done. And if you watch the keynote from Elon, he talks about synthetic data, which I've written a bunch of posts on, which is that his operating say CUDA stuff that he's released allow you to create billions of iterations of synthetic data to train the humanoid robots. And that training is at the most baby steps stage right now. So to your core question about the efficacy of the humanoids today, it's non-existent. If you go back and look at the reviews of the robotaxi day that Elon had in the fall, they had about a dozen or so robots out, and to a robot, it was a human controlling the robot remotely from a building in the back on the studio lot. And the voice you heard was a human talking to...
Right. Or selling it. It wasn't.
It doesn't exist. It's a magic trick right now. And that's all it is. It's a fun novelty trick.
Now, this is the key focus now, right? Google is doing the same. They're trying to follow the laws of physics. The LLMs don't understand the kinematic equations, like acceleration, concepts like friction, program those kinematics and physics to generate 3D experiences that LLMs can then train upon
And learn and then do useful things. So that means that the world, OpenAI was in the robot business. They're rumored to be going back in. They have an investment in Figure, which is one of the big robots. So if you look at Jensen's picture on stage with 15 robots in the back, one of them was the Figure robots from OpenAI. And my point is that there are going to be dozens of these things, but they're all in the early iteration of trying to figure out how to learn to get the synthetic data to train them to do useful things. And it's a promising area, but just like LLMs, we're going to have 5-10 years of big investment and innovation.
It certainly looks inevitable, right? I mean, the data, we'll come back to data center capacity, but the pipeline is there.
Yes.
They have the approaches. We have not run into boundaries. As you said, we're growing faster than Moore's law.
Yes.
So the future is going to come at us fast. Let's get to DeepSeek now.
Okay.
Page on Nvidia and Tesla and humanoids. We haven't gotten aliens yet, but let's talk about DeepSeek. DeepSeek, I'll introduce it for you. China-based startup invests essentially a de minimis amount of money. The headlines say, I don't know, something like $6 million. That rivals or even better than GPT-4, which is spending billions and billions of dollars. How much of that is fact versus fiction? What's the read-through from that?
Okay, so right now it's being framed on two levels. One is it's US versus China, that here's a Chinese company that created an LLM model at a fraction of the cost to the US. Oh my God, we're losing. Okay, that's one takeaway that people have. Second is, if this company is able to do it for pittance relative to the hundreds of billions being spent, was something wrong with this picture? And the answer is both of these things are more interesting. DeepSeek itself is something that Liang Wenfeng is a founder. He's a great entrepreneur. He could be an Elon in China in a world that was more startup friendly in China right now under Xi. He could be the next Alibaba. He had a hedge fund, a macro hedge fund, and he's an AI scientist. And the technologies that he used to create DeepSeek are very clever, efficient ways of using far lesser capable processors to do far more than the competing models. And he did that through genuine innovation. I've spent a lot of time in the weeds of this at the technical level. And when you look at all this stuff, he basically created some very hardcore engineering efficiencies in terms of a mixture of experts and a bunch of underlying technologies, where he created a very sparse model where the model has 300 plus billion parameters, but at any given time, it has over 30 billion that are activated. That can be run only on 2,000 GPUs as opposed to 30,000 GPUs or 300,000. And then because of the optimization of the data training and the inference work, et cetera, I'm going to set a high level to make it accessible to people. It can meet or beat most of the benchmarks from Llama and OpenAI and so on. And the benchmarks are the way that all of the scientists basically and the researchers compare these models. And so right now, why it's gotten everyone's attention is on the text-based stuff. It has met or slightly beaten most of the models on a bunch of different things like coding and math and so on. And that's why it's interesting.
Yeah, Sam had this quip on Twitter, not referencing DeepSeek specifically, but he said, look, quote, it's it is relatively easy to copy something that works, referencing DeepSeek, looking at Meta LLM's published white paper. Meta's published how they build their models. It goes on to say it is extremely hard to do something new, risky, and difficult when you don't know if it will work. Individual researchers rightly get a lot of glory for that when they do it. It's the coolest thing in the world.
And he's totally spot on. The first mover is doing all the hard work, and then everyone else emulating, especially in the open source world. But it's not just a copy. So I will say it's not just a copy, it's innovating on the copies. But the point is they are building on the shoulders of giants. Artsog, my favorite term. I've done a post on that. They are building on work that, and the next version of DeepSeek 4 or whatever it is, will learn from the reasoning capabilities of O3 models and so on, chain of thought, all of that. And there'll be more work. So yes, in every technology, people learn from the next. When Microsoft, Dell, and Compaq built the first PCs, literally in the next 3 years, you had 300 PC companies that all figured out how to build PCs. And that's the nature of technology. Once you have something that gets off the thing, everyone builds a version that's slightly better here or there. And DeepSeek is that. So it's this week's, oh my God, it's extraordinary. And next week, it could be something from China. It could be something from France. It could be something from India. It can come from anywhere because the technologies are, the toothpaste is out of the, AI toothpaste is out of the tube. Everyone can see almost everything that's going on, even if it's closed, and build iteratively on it. And there's some clever things that DeepSeek's engineers did here. So they get hats off.
Yeah, no, they do. Look, it's clever engineering. You got substantial output for far less impact, less cost. That creates a lot of impact. And the US firms should maintain a significant competitive advantage because they invest far more in research. They have far more capability, but they're going to spend tens and tens of billions of dollars more to maintain that pole position relative to a rival that can get close to parity.
So right now we are looking at what we're comparing our mainframe companies against PC companies. When we're talking about the US OpenAI and the Microsoft and the Googles of the world to a DeepSeek, they're the whales against the minnows. So they're apples and oranges in that way. What we also have to look for there will and are DeepSeeks in the US and Europe that are also doing, smaller companies that are doing innovations, and that's what I'm saying right now. Even though we're in the first couple of weeks of 2020, it's just extraordinary fire hose. Just the things that Jensen announced on stage is going to mean that instead of seeing one DeepSeek a month, we're going to see 10 or 20 before this year is out. Because why? Because if you and I can get a $3,000 supercomputer on our desk in May, guess what? There is 10 times the capacity of what DeepSeek was. We can, in some capabilities, we can build our own. And that's the thing. The spigots are open and we're going to see innovate.
At your home.
You look at the specs, it's crazy what he's got in there.
Do you want to rattle off some of the specs? I'm going to find it.
Oh my God, yeah. It's multiple petaflops. It's got 5 to 10 times the memory of a normal computer. And it's a Blackwell version of a chip that is co-produced with MediaTek. Add another one to your Mag 7, 11, 12, 15. MediaTek is one of the leading companies that builds systems on a chip for gaming computers and phones and so on. It's like the Qualcomm out of Taiwan, a mini Qualcomm out of Taiwan. It's about $70-80 billion market cap, as an example. And it's a co-built chip that goes into that. And you're going to be able to link more than one of these things. I want to buy 2 of them because with that, I can put a full Llama 405 parameter model on them and play around them on my desktop. And it looks very good too. It looks like my Apple Mini under my monitor. And with that, I don't need a data center. I mean, it's not a data center, obviously, because its capability is far less, but it's because we were talking about DeepSeek, I can do innovations of applications, underlying model, all of that, whatever I want to do with these kinds of technologies accessible to me.
It'll be uncensored, it'll be private, it'll be fully in your control. And going back to the Wintel metaphor, we're going to see the emergence of the equivalent of called like Linux, or the Red Hats of the world.
Correct.
You're going to be able to run locally and get distributed, decentralized intelligence. And I don't think we fully understand what that means.
No, and look, this thing, Jensen, just like he's close to all the big CEOs and founders, he's close to Michael Dell. There's no reason, this is so pure speculation, that there isn't a Dell version of this gizmo, announced in the May timeframe as well, that had Windows on it and Linux all coexisting. So, and has two operating systems that you can run side by side in one machine. You don't need it. This thing you can just connect. You can literally put it right next to your Mac or your Windows machine, and you can do amazing things. But you're going to easy products out of this.
I'm going to hit play on this video. And then the question for you, Michael, is going to be, what are the social implications of this? Think about like national security and different countries. And
This is the latest AI supercomputer, and it's finally called Project Digits right now. And if you have a good name for it, reach out to us. Here's the amazing thing. This is an AI supercomputer. It runs the entire NVIDIA AI stack. All of NVIDIA software runs on this. DGX Cloud runs on this. This sits somewhere and it's wireless or connected to your computer. It's even a workstation if you like it to be. And you could access it, you could reach it like a cloud supercomputer, and NVIDIA's AI works on it. And it's based on a super secret chip that we've been working on called GB1, the smallest Grace Blackwell that we make. And I have, you know what, let's show everybody inside.
It's amazing.
I don't think we fully understand the ramifications of that. You can develop nuclear fission and fusion blueprints with a supercomputer. You can simulate thermodynamic machines.
No, it's
Simulate.
you and I saw Sun Microsystems and workstation companies in our earlier lives and so on. These are the new workstations. These are the generative AI workstations that are just coming out of chips. It's just extraordinary. This is literally this from a PC point of view. It's like watching 1979, 1980, 1981. The software and the hardware is being put together to create computing power locally that you can then create all kinds of crazy things. And yes, what used to be relegated to huge rooms of supercomputers will be done on desktop. And this is why I've been saying in my last few discussions with on these podcasts, I've been saying we're in a world where the mainframe, mini computer, and PC and smartphone cycles, which took 4 decades, are going to get smushed into 5. And with this, it just accelerated. Because that was a hypothetical statement. And we just, with this Digits product, it's real. In May, I'm on the wait list. I want 2 of them. At least.
Is that I want one too. I have a Windows Surface AI PC laptop. I never use the AI feature. They have a button and it gives you a window and lights up an AI window. Essentially, it's a white label version of GPT, which I never use, so that I integrate to my phone. So I leave it. And so they failed to deliver on these AI PCs, which is no surprise to you. I mean, you and I talked about this 6 months ago, but I did have that FOMO response. Gee, I want this supercomputer, some cool stuff with it. But is this a dual use technology?
When you say dual use, yeah. Oh, you mean in terms of good and bad things or military things? Everything is dual use. Fire was dual use, right? You had those, the moment fire came along, they figure out ways to put on a slingshot and throw it over the moat and hit the castle. Everything's dual use in the world. Totally. Knife is a dual use technology.
Let's go to like policy now, right? But I'm on the side of like innovation. I'm not worried about AI coming out of the box like a ghost in the machine. And I don't have those concerns because I've looked at the white papers. I've seen how these things train and operate. They're solving an objective function, a math problem. They're trying to minimize a cost function and maximize some utility function. It doesn't mean that it can't be put towards ends that aren't in the interest of people in the same way that how someone handles a gun can be put towards purposes that are not in our social interests, right? But DataSec is the head of AI and crypto policy. He's going to be in the accelerationist camp, right? What do you think the implications of that are? Are there any hard calls on the AI policy front that we can't anticipate? It seems to me it's going to be, hey, light touch, go innovate. The government's not going to be in your way. There's a question on export controls. Are there other dimensions to AI policy that we're looking for more clarity on?
Great question. In the last 2 years, when you watch how Sam Altman got fired and rehired within 2 or 3 days last November a year ago, I should say, and we've seen a sea change in terms of the stance on AI being focused on fear and trust and so on. Not that it's gone away, but at least in the US, it's now receding in the distance for now. And I think that's the right approach because these technologies are so young. Everything we've talked for over an hour, these technologies barely do the things that we tell them to do today. I'm talking about even ChatGPT, and they're wrong about 25% of the time with hallucination. So we're very early. But the broader issue, the question of dangers and so on, yes, that's always there. It's been there for every technology, et cetera. But I've maintained, just like Jan LeCun, who's the AI chief for Meta and a big AI godfather, that it's premature to worry about the existential risk of AI. So that's the good news, is that was shifting over the last year. And then the administration change and the Congress change that's coming in a couple of weeks with David Sachs and the whole Silicon Valley crowd, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, the A6 people who are going to go to Washington, et cetera. Those are all good things that mean that there is a tailwind. There's an acceleration movement to allow US companies to do more, large, medium, small, everybody to do more with it, with somewhat less worry and fear on the existential stuff. In this context, Europe is now a teeny bit even further behind. So Europe has an issue. They have to figure out how they want to approach the safety thing. And China is, of course, pedal to the metal. They're just nuclear plants, energy for AI data centers. We'll build 20 of them in the next 6 years, or no problem, whatever it is. They're just doing that. In that kind of context, space race, China is full pedal to the metal. US now is going to go from the second to the third gear because of the changes with David Sachs and all these people that you're talking about from Silicon Valley. And that's a good thing at this early stage from my perspective. And it also, for 2025 and 26, it frees up, hopefully, we'll see, the ability for large companies, medium companies, small companies to do deals with each other, to buy companies, to grow companies. We don't, maybe we have to rely less on these acquihires that we did, take unders and so on, that happened in the last few months. So I think that's all a good thing for near term for US and AI and technology.
Have you picked up anything through your network around what this means for export controls? We saw this headline yesterday where the Biden administration has further limitations. They're curbing Nvidia exports to China. So we're seeing that kind of a flurry of these actions in the last few days.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of it's going to be reversed. Like, how do you see this playing out, the export controls dynamic?
No, I think that move, you're totally spot on for pointing attention to that. And it is interesting. This, again, there's a bipartisan force on US-China stuff, and Biden's last minute moves on the additional curbs, I think, are short-sighted in my view, because I think it limits the opportunities for the US, the leading US companies that we've been talking about, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, every company that you're imagining. Their technologies are all dual use. They can be so they should be sold everywhere. They're all going to see 10, 15, 20% hits, more in some cases, because they will be able to sell less of these in China and related markets because of these curbs. They're putting more red tape. Well, maybe that can be unwound. I don't know yet, because it's not entirely clear what they're going to do, and they only have a week or so left to do it. But yeah, in general, the more we put, and I've written a lot about US-China on my Substack, under thread the needle idea. But the more we do to curb our technologies, we're going to see more reactionary moves by China. We're already seeing it in drone batteries and battery technology for cars. It's just the beginning. It again, I don't think either side wins. We all lose. And our companies, which are the leadership companies for all kinds of reasons that Sam is talking about and Jensen's talking about, they lose because they don't get the market share that they should get. And it's not just market share of selling so many widgets this quarter versus next quarter, et cetera. It's that all of these are foundational technologies. When this stuff gets adopted by the world, they then build huge layers of enterprise software applications, consumer software applications are on top of it, which then get baked in for decades. The more China builds up more of their operating systems and their AI chips and their batteries and their cars, and they sell more of them around the world in markets that want the cheaper products, then all the stuff, the value add pieces will get built on top of their technology stacks. And we're not looking at that. Those are the unintended consequences of our current policies that will come and bite us in the butt in the next 5 to 10 years. So by actually lowering tariffs, which is, I know is a tough word on the political side right now, by lowering the restrictions of US technology, et cetera, we benefit multiple fold long term. And those things are politically lost in a fog right now on both sides. And I think that is a very real thing that we need to be thoughtful about. But the next year or two, because of the political winds are very strong, the sailboats are going to, instead of going from point A to B in a straight line, they're going to zig and zag and lose speed and distance.
Yeah, we'll have to see how much bark is behind, or how much bite is behind the bark around tariffs, right? Trump invited Xi to his inauguration. I don't know whether that's an olive branch or whether he's trying to handle Xi in the same way that he referred to Trudeau as a governor. I really don't know. it's a psyop or it's a negotiation or it's an olive branch or it's all of the above at the same time.
Yeah. The one thing I will point out on here is that this is actually a benefit of Elon being at Trump's side because he has huge buttering of his bread in China with
Yeah.
Tesla. And he's actually looking for a permit for self-driving in China, which is going to be, because all of this stuff is very transactional as well. The new
Right.
administration is very transactional. So yes, these are transactional things that are going on. And so one has to hope for the best, that they will navigate, they will thread the needle, as I keep saying, and not go head to head on this note.
It's difficult because you need an equilibrium where China stops brokering American technology through cybersecurity invasions, which you saw the news article. I'm surprised it didn't get much attention. But around 2 months ago, it was disclosed that China had hacked major telco networks,
Yeah.
identify and locate, track Americans, and not just Americans, but Americans in intelligence agencies. So the incredible security breach. So,
But Ram, that's going on for a long time, right? You remember the Sony break-in, it's many years ago. And by the way, it's not just China, right? It's almost every nation. The tools that we're talking about with AI, et cetera, they're getting cheaper, more accessible. North Korea is punching way above its weight. Iran is in terms of their
Project Epsilon, we were listening on Angela Merkel's conversations on herself. And so, of course, this is like the realpolitik. But part of this is American companies are losing IP to China. They're investing tens of billions of dollars. We're talking about DeepSeek. This is one instance of China playing the fast follow game with low capital.
Go ahead, finish your thought, please.
Well, how do you get to an equilibrium where parties can lower the stakes? Because you're right. Look, if parties cooperate, meaning we say, hey, look, we're slow off on theft. We're going to cooperate with each other, lower tariffs, engage in the trade. We get the batteries, can accelerate on our front. China has issues. They've got double-digit youth unemployment. They have a declining population, demographic pyramids inverting. There's gains to be had.
Yeah.
There's specialization that would benefit both parties.
No, I agree. I just want to point out that the filter through which we're talking about this right now, it basically, the underlying assumption is that the US has and always will be ahead in innovation technology versus China. And what I'm positing right now, China in terms of patents has caught up with us. Yes, they may have stolen a whole bunch of our IP over the last 10, 20, 30 years and so on. It's water under the bridge. Because we have no time machine, I think the world needs to figure out how to move forward. And the point I'd like to just point out, because we talked about so many things, robotics, batteries, on a lot of fronts, Ram, China is ahead. Their IP is better on a lot of the stuff. And as this stuff accelerates,
solar, nuclear, and battery.
There's so many things that are coming. Their IP is better. Their infrastructure is better. And it's interesting. You can see it because the Chinese companies, if you look at the private sector companies that have been kneecapped in some ways by Xi in China, they have moved over $250 billion to $500 billion in foreign direct investment out of China, put factories in all of the Asian countries and Mexico and et cetera, not just to go around US curbs, but to build more flexibly the ecosystem, the plants, the supply chains in Vietnam, in Indonesia, and all these other places, and India. And ironically, the same things that we used to complain for China basically making us give them their IP, those countries are doing the same thing. India is saying, hey, if you want to build all your technology to sell it to India, we need all the IP. So China is now on the other foot on having to share their IP. And by the way, they have more and more valuable IP. I just want to point out that the world we're going in, especially at the race that we are making China go faster because of the curbs, they're going to have, it may not be in the next 3 to 5 years, they'll have better lithography, EUV machines and capabilities for chips in the next 3 to 5 years. Everyone focuses on the latest EUV machines, which are the $300-400 million machines from ASML. But China, basically, they're basically producing so much of all the chips that go into everything that's less sexy. And they have the IP for that we need actually. When I go and talk to Skydio or any of the drone guys here, they need those batteries. They need those electronics. They need those subcomponents. The IP is over there. If they try to get it done here and the VCs and the government will subsidize it, it'll cost them 3 to 4 times. Their same drone for that thing is going to cost 40, 50, 60,000 versus 5, 6,000 over there. And so I'm just saying the filter of we're ahead of China is an increasingly fading filter. The world is going to have technology. And it's not going to be just China. China just happens to be the biggest one. We're going to see this come out of lots of other places. India's going to have a lot of this stuff. There's no reason why there can't be 20 DeepSeeks coming from India in the next.
Distributed intelligence will accelerate global innovation.
Say again?
Distributed intelligence will accelerate global innovation.
To your earlier amazing point, the world has always been distributed. It's just that it's accelerating, right? Because everyone has access to this. The compute is getting built at a massive case. And by the way, we're going to probably find, just like there was an overbuilding of the of the telecom, there is going to be an overbuilding of the data centers. And there's going to be a lot of compute available for a lot of applications that'll be as efficient, or if not more, than a DeepSeek. So yeah, it's distributed, but it's going gangbusters and accelerated distribution is what I'm underlining.
I'll make a point for you then and against at the same time. Look, on the one hand, yeah, China's ahead on nuclear, way ahead of the United States on energy. They don't have that issue. They're setting up nuclear reactors.
Yes.
Well, they are ahead on battery technology, far more efficient, cost effective, powering BYD. It gives BYD an edge versus other EVs. That's two. Third, they're ahead on solar. They've got a lost. That edge goes away when other energy forms come online. That's not going to happen for decades of fusion. Who knows, 10, 12 years. But maybe the prize of AGI is a singularity event where if you get there first, you can solve the battery issue. You can solve these other issues where China has an edge. Maybe that's how you look. I don't know.
So battery issue, again, it just assumes that there is a single battery. There are at least 8 different battery technologies I'm tracking. The iron one, there's stuff going on in Japan. There's so many. And what I'm saying is these are extraordinarily iterative, accelerating sets of technologies that are being developed. It's not one country, one battery, it's everywhere, right? In the next 5 years, that's just exploding. And a lot of that stuff is over there. The other thing I just want to point out is, again, if we think about it as a US versus everybody else way, we are giving away the core advantage the US has had since World War II, which is globalization that was basically protected with the US military umbrella around the world that allowed trade everywhere so that we could, the negative of what we did over the last 30, 40 years is you could say that we let our manufacturing go to China. Okay. And so it hollowed out our politics in terms of our towns and cities and factories to make shirts and so on. And 80, 90% of the buttons that we're wearing, the shirts, the sweaters, everything in behind you and me, everything is made in China. The flip of that we don't think about is that our economy had the benefit of not having the pollution that came with all of that, right? Because if all of these things had been built in the US, our sweaters, our t-shirts, etc., America's pollution levels, and there are statistics on this, data on this, would have been 15, 20, 30% higher. You can see it in China right now, and they're fixing that right now. And they're at number two, more importantly, our economy then went on much further up on the value stack, on the services stack, much ahead. And we are 6 times, 10 times, 20 times ahead of China on that front. And that is the value add piece that really gets helped by AI. What you're talking about, AGI. When AGI came along, guess what? The one thing I will tell you right now, okay, and I've said this publicly, China may win the supply chain piece of a lot of the stuff we're talking about, but they're going to lose on AI in terms of AI applications. Why? Because their system, because it's focused on controlling information, the communist CCP, in terms of the data that goes into train the models. If I can't in China say that China's growth rate, GDP, is 2% and not 5% and not go to jail, guess what? My models are not going to know that. So if I'm in China, a business person or an economist or a teacher or anything, my models are garbage in, garbage out. I may have the best DeepSeek model or the best model in the world for LLMs, but because I'm putting garbage data in, because it's controlled by the government, I'm going to get garbage output. It's not going to be efficacy. It's not going to be the same value that is created versus what we're going to see if we keep it free and open here in Europe, everywhere else. China loses that, and they don't want to talk about that. So China in AI and the things that we talk about in box 6, which is the applications, they will lose in China. They may win if they're allowed to export those applications overseas, which is what they've effectively done with TikTok. They've effectively done with their e-commerce technologies like Temu and Shein. Temu is going public in London, and it's going to be one of the IPOs of the year. And massive innovations. But those are Chinese entrepreneurs who are set free to compete on a global scale. And they're as good as anything we've got. And that is a good thing because the better players we got and they got, that's what makes a good football game, that makes a good soccer game, that makes a good cricket game. We want the best against the best. And that's a good thing for everybody.
First up, double underscore your point on this whole manufacturing. I think a lot of people, they see this visible cost of manufacturing jobs going overseas the last few decades and the hollowing out American manufacturing, but they don't see the extraordinary benefits, to your point, of the United States moving to the highest end of the value chain, the best jobs, and whole new industries that exist now that did not exist then, whether it's e-commerce or data centers or more healthcare jobs that are higher paying, and you have a less cyclical economy in a services. Kind of Rick Reeder last week, CEO of BlackRock, said, "Hey, the U.S. might not get a recession because it's a services economy. In a manufacturing economy, you're subject to the commodity
Totally.
roll with, right?" So I don't think I agree with the Rick Reeder, and recessions are banished because of service economy. But I think the general point stands, and I don't want my sons or daughters in a manufacturing job.
No.
More hazardous, it's blue labor. You don't think in your hands and legs around, and that's going to go away. So I agree with that broader point. It's just hard for me to see how you get to a detente where both sides pull back to an equilibrium that makes sense. And it's just hard. It's hard for me to see that.
You just put your finger on the toughest problem for us as investors. We can't quantify this. We can put probabilities on it, but it's not as comforting in terms of our models of how we invest actively on these uncertainties. And that is totally correct, which is why it is a little bit encouraging for the Silicon Valley folks who've been able to make the inroads into DC that we've talked about. The only thing I would say to them is don't get prematurely gleeful in terms of where it is. There's a lot of work ahead. The danger I see on that side of the equation with Silicon Valley and DC is that they may succumb to a little bit prematurely the mission accomplished moment. They're feeling very good right now. If you look at their podcasts and so on, and the mission has just started. To the questions that you're asking, how do we navigate through within the time?
We don't have that place yet. We didn't talk about Google Gemini 2.0 Flash. Why don't we go there, then go to energy data center? It's a major announcement. By the way, I think the drama between Google and OpenAI is just delicious.
Yeah.
The 12 days of announcements. In the middle of that, Google says, "Hey, look, we solved quantum computing. We got this 122-bit machine out there." They drop Gemini 2.0 Flash. And then OpenAI responds with the Chrome plugin that allows you to do search through GPT. Yeah, they're going at it.
That's a boxing match. That's absolutely on right now. Totally right.
If it's a boxing match, I think it's one of those memes where you've got like Mike Tyson. He's got his hand on like the 4-foot person, which would be like OpenAI here. I don't really think it's a competitive match. I think if you look at it very narrowly, it looks competitive. But I think just the capabilities that Google has.
No, I agree with your point. I just meant boxing match in terms of the punch counter. They're explicitly matching week by week. You saw OpenAI have its 12 days of shipments, and Google came in on the last 11th day and just dumped a whole bunch of stuff, including VO2. A day after OpenAI put Sora out and gave it to MKBHD, the big video reviewer, and Google comes in with VO2 and blows away the Sora stuff because of its better physics capability and permanence capabilities and so on. So you're totally right. That's all I meant with the boxing match, not in terms of the caliber of and the size of the players. But they're both there.
What were some of the highlights of Google's recent announcements? Flash 2.0.
So on the Google stuff, the Gemini stuff is very impressive. They're absolutely running hard on the voice modality stuff because they're already in 2 billion, 3 billion products and services. You're going to see Google Voice be directly distributed far sooner and wider and deeper across the world. Across 70% of the world's smartphones are Android phones, and not all of them are going to allow Google services to come in, but let's say half of them do. That still means Google has a bigger reach on voice modality, where you can talk to your kids or have kids play with your Android phone or on an iOS app, on a Google iOS app on an iPhone. That is, and I have a whole post on just that. That is going to be very big, and their capability on the voice modality is as impressive as anything OpenAI is doing, etc. OpenAI's opportunity and challenge is how do they get the distribution? Their Microsoft relationship doesn't give them that. Their relationship with Apple is good, but Apple doesn't distribute or ship out the AI-enabled version of Siri at least until April, which is iOS 18.4. And that has deep integration of Siri into all of the iOS apps, but also will leverage OpenAI's voice stuff. So one area to watch for Google OpenAI is on the voice side. Second is video. I already touched on that, Sora and VO stuff, right?
It looks like Google's video, they can create clips up to 2 minutes in length at 4K quality, which is 6 times the length and 4 times the resolution of OpenAI Sora. So they came from behind and leapt ahead. Google started multimodal.
Yeah.
Google's been very strategic about AI going back 6-7 years.
And this is lap 2 or 3 of a multi-dozen lap race at the minimum. Nobody has put in sound and music and voice into these clips yet. That is yet to come. There's a lot of work to be done. And so I would just point out that for Google versus OpenAI so far. The other things are going to be again, because Google has at least 6 or 7 products that are 1 billion users each, whether it's in Gmail or Docs. You saw what they did with Notebook LM, which takes any document, PDF, etc., that can be converted into podcasts immediately. The core thing Google has that OpenAI or even Apple to some extent does not have are most of our personal data, our emails, our documents, our spreadsheets, etc. And that if they can keep our trust, that it will be processed with appropriate deference and privacy and security and trust and so on. When they do the work of customizing that stuff with all these Gemini capabilities, regardless of which model, ultra or medium, small, doesn't matter, or on the device, they have nano version as well, that'll go there. There are Android phones you're going to get with AI chips on them, or you can get them, the Pixel, etc. But my point is that we're going to see a lot more mass market customization of AI features from Google before we see it from everybody else. The next one up is Apple in conjunction with ChatGPT to a certain extent. And then it just falls off the cliff, right? And then Meta, maybe because Meta has Meta AI on one of their 3-4 services, but it's just a general chatbot.
I generally agree with that. I would elevate Meta. We'll come back to the real quick, but Google's pole position to win the race for personal assistant AI, which should be a highly valuable subscription product. 2, Americans routinely trade off trust with convenience. Remember the Equifax breach? No one talks about that. What are the consequences for Equifax of breaching private data? No one cares. People will accept convenience, and Google should benefit from that. Meta, I think, is still not pricing from AI, but increasingly is getting some credit for that. They've got 500 million users now on AI. They've got the distribution. OpenAI has a dependency on Apple, whereas Google and Meta have dependencies on no one except NVIDIA.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. Meta, I will just caution, Zuckerberg has been very clear. He's very frustrated that he does not have the smartphone. He knows he needs a hardware piece of it. He doesn't have it. I have the smart glasses from Meta. I like them, but they're not as useful to me because I can take pictures and videos, but because it doesn't have a direct link into the iPhone through the app because of Apple restrictions or other things going on between the two companies, I have to do each picture video one by one to put it into my overall.
It's not a direct access. It's clearly anti-competitive behavior.
Again, it's very technical and you're going to have to bring in the lawyers. Apple will say, what I'm trying to get at is unless you have the hardware piece that you also have some control, everything else then is a negotiation and lawsuits.
They can build a phone though. They can build a phone. Solana has launched a phone. This is all commodity parts now. You call up Fox.
My dear friend, Google has a phone. It's irrelevant. The Pixel is relevant. I have 6 pixels sitting over here. There's 2 here. It's less than a fraction of 1% of the global phone market. Getting phones out there in the hundreds of millions is not a trivial task. And on the Android side, yes, people get intoxicated with the Android 70% unit market share. 80% of that is basically fragmented in Asia, particularly India and China. And in each of those countries, it's at least half a dozen to a dozen companies, and most of which do not touch the Google services. They do not.
Fair point. Everyone has a different edge. Here, Google has the edge on data, access, personal assistant, edge on software, even compute edges. Apple's got the edge on distribution, the iPhone. I think actually it's the right form factor combination. You need the glasses and you need to interact with a phone. So no one's got all the components, but they're racing towards it. And then Elon's got what if Neuralink is the right form factor, like 8 years from now?
Okay. So I love you that you brought up Neuralink. I'm a big fan of, Elon on Neuralink. But the problem with Neuralink to me is it's a wonderful technology, and it took, he started it before the whole business of non-invasive biohacking was real. Now there's at least one dozen companies I'm tracking. And by the way, you may see the kinds of things that Neuralink is hoping to do. Some of them stuff are just going to be torn off by applications that you don't even expect. Bring up Meta again, since you brought it up as a favorite. Meta, if you look at the $10,000 AR glasses that Zuckerberg got huge positive media coverage 2 or 3 months ago, and it's amazing technology. It's not going to be consumerized for at least 3-4 years because it costs $20,000-$30,000 per, because it literally used industrial diamonds for the glass, and they have to find a material to substitute that. But if you look deeper with those glasses, Meta invented this ring, okay? And that is pretty much all patented and ready to go. And what's cool about that is that you can attach it to any kind of smart glasses. They could even open it up open source with other products and so on. And the ring is interesting to your hacking thing, is literally it translates, it's very cool, cutting edge technology without invasiveness, because it's literally reading muscle and nerve impulses and converting that into right now controls for the glasses, but it can be used for so much more theoretically, data entry and so on. So what I'm getting at is that there are so many non-invasive ways to do through wearables. We're going to see so many different things that people are going to be able to do that it will sap some of the mainstream applications of devices that you have to insert into your brain, which is, and so Neuralink is going to have to evolve as a company to do both invasive and non-invasive stuff. The invasive stuff is critical for the kinds of critical medical things that they're doing, allowing people who can't speak to speak and read and all those kinds of applications. But to do the more mainstream consumer things, we're going to see a lot of non-invasive wearables. Apple, they're rumored to be talking about working on AirPods that have a camera built in that will be huge sensor inputs from the world, training the models with your permission. And through the headphones, they're also potentially working on the cheaper versions of glasses, smart glasses, and so on. And the phone and the watches, they're totally going for the health market, right? Apple is, and Tim Cook, he just did a big interview. I wrote about it a few days ago. He said it out front. AI, the core major app that they're focused on is health. And I think about Apple as the biggest mainstream competitor to Neuralink on driven AI, non-invasive stuff. And then potentially companies like Meta with their ring technology and other things that they're tweaking in the lab, which is
other form factor people are focused on. I don't even know if Neuralink is in the same competitive set as wearables, although why you make that distinction.
Those are Venn diagrams that don't cross.
Yeah, there are therapeutic reasons for Neuralink.
Deep medical reasons, you're totally right. But the reason I linked them is because mainstream versus huge medical, deep therapeutic, FDA clearance type of applications, right?
Right.
And one of the big hits in 2024 for Apple was they put hearing tests into the AirPod Pros that are FDA cleared over the counter, number one. And they did the same thing, as you remember, on some of the blood things and other things that they're working on as well. So
the issue with Neuralink would be that if I also had a Tesla, is Elon would push an update to the Tesla. If they had a bug, it would go to the Neuralink. I would turn right 90 degrees and run a 60 miles per hour on my wall and hit my face. That's why no one's going to sign up for Neuralink. The risk of the stakes are too high.
Look, LASIK, I'll give you another example. LASIK has been around for 25 years. It still costs $1,200 per eye, or maybe I can get it cheap at Walmart at $600-$700. The penetration rates, I've not looked at it recently, but there's still, even the people who wear glasses, which is 40-50% of that, maybe 20-30% have done LASIK, even the basic stuff. It takes a long time for people to allow foreign things to go into your person.
Let me talk the other side of my ear now. Look, there's a lot of interest in tropics and performance enhancement. There's a quantified self movement, which the Aura Ring and other things are part of. I got the 8 Sleep device, which is cool. It cools your bed temperature. It wakes you up gently. It changes the heat. There's a his and her setting. Super, super cool. People are their own worst enemies in how they make decision making. It's true. It's called FOMO, selling bottoms, buy tops. That's just one dimension. You got the 7 deadly sins, right? There's the other facets of human behavior. And one could imagine some advantages from tech human connection. I don't think it's a mainstream thing. I really don't. I think most people just not go in that direction. But there will be early adopters like the cyber enthusiasts and
Totally.
kind of the William Gibson neuromancer, right? And the advantages to that would be quite significant, actually. Your human scope of capability just increases because you imagine you're walking through Grand Central. And whenever I walk through Grand Central, maybe 1 in 3 times, I run into a friend. Imagine every time I walk through Grand Central, the AI is saying, hey, Ram, look left. And I get spontaneous value in my life because of AI prompting, or I'm just making better decisions, or I'm getting prompted at the right time. Hey, I called the Uber. It's outside. You got 8 minutes. Go ask for the check. By the way, here's the tip. So you don't calculate that, right? You could, or just augmented reality that doesn't require glasses in the same way you're like, you could see some consumer early adoption there.
Yeah, absolutely you will. My only point is the invasive versus non-invasive. It's wired versus wireless headphones. And until Apple come up with the wired headphones were less than 10% of the global market. I looked at it up one time. And then the moment you have Bluetooth and all this other stuff, guess what? It's all flipped. We're not even buying Macintosh systems like you and I would buy because our Bluetooth headphones are good enough. Not good enough. They're not audiophile, but
how do we get closer and closer to technology? 40 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to have this idea of lying down and having a laser carve out something in your eyeball to improve your vision, right? That happens every day now.
no.
So,
To this day, I had my LASIK stuff done. In fact, my first date with my now wife was after 3 hours after I had my LASIK things in 2001 or 2 or something. And I was scared stiff because I would read all the statistics about how it could go wrong, and I almost canceled the appointment. And it was life-changing. What I'm saying is it was magical. It literally made my eyes 10 years younger. And I could do that.
I speak to myself. I'm glad I did it. And there's a lot of mental health issues out there. That use case isn't part of the Neuralink context, but it will be, right? You can measure depression. You can through lower activity in certain parts of the brain, right? Yeah, the future's coming at us fast.
No, all of the stuff. Look, you mentioned Neuromancer. There's a great Keanu Reeves movie version of that where he's got memory gets on his brain and it goes.
It's also written by William Gibson, right?
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful movies. Go watch them. It's just awesome. But my point is, all these things were 10, 15, 20 years. What we're talking about here is in the next 5 years because of all these things. This is all mainstream in very little bit. And that's why you talk about social change and dual use. Yeah, the good thing about humans is that we're extraordinarily adaptable. We had to figure out how to go from a horse to a car for a couple of weeks, but then we never look back. And this thing is now, there's a new car basically in a different field almost every couple of months, a month.
Yeah, I think the big social question you look out is going to be, what's the primary form of decision making? Is it human or artificial, or is it human or
both?
synthetic?
For a near term, it's both. For a very long time, it's both. And then this gets to the question I always comes up, right? AGI. And I'm in the camp that AGI is not a singular thing. It's just an evolving thing. That what Sam is now talking about, I agree with Sam at OpenAI, Dario at Anthropic. They're now saying it's a spectrum of capabilities. But for the longest time, these things are going to help us. That's what Jensen was talking about with the robots, right? The robots are just going to help incrementally as their capabilities go up, as the data improves, the synthetic, the processing, the cheap, all of that stuff, that they help us do what humans do. John Deere at CES, go look it up. It's just, they have their 3rd generation tractor. It looks like something out of a Mad Max movie. It's awesome. The thing was 3 stories. Then they're changing the farming business with these self-driving tractors, do all kinds of things on the farm. And again, the application is because the farmers can't hire the people at scale anymore. And so they're using these machines.
So John Deere also has that remote disabling technology, which they use in Ukraine. I wonder if GPUs are selling to China or something. On AGI, so Sam Altman says that he expects AGI in a year. I don't think that's true. Want to get your quick take on that. But before we go there, look, more and more decisions are getting pushed to the edge and they're being automated by somewhere else. So you see in market making and financial markets, for example, you're going to see more radiology automated by AI. There's this Netflix show called Alone. So season of it, it's a survivalist show. It's about a group of 8 people that are dropped off in some obscure location like the Arctic. And they got to survive for 120 days. and they've got to make decisions and will live off their own constitution and wits. Like 15 years from now, like the idea of someone buying their own stock is going to be, it's going to be the guy from Alone. You made that decision yourself. And then what about partner selection or career decisions?
All of those things. Oh, exactly. Look, AGI, I'm in the camp that at least 5 to 10 years. So I'm in the camp on there. And just because it evolves, all these capabilities evolve, because the things, when we talk about AGI for the last 2 or 3 years, we've been thinking about it in terms of digital AI, stuff in language models and so on. But then you start to expand it for AGI for robots, AGI for cars. Then, because I want the cars to be really smart as humans. And that's 3, 4, 5, 6. So as you expand the umbrella, it's not a one thought you wake up and the world has AGI. When Sam said at one point, 1 year, it came out it leaked that there was a negotiation going on with Microsoft as OpenAI is transitioning from nonprofit to profit. One of the clauses that's being renegotiated was that if the nonprofit board determined that OpenAI got to AGI, then Microsoft didn't have any rights to OpenAI's technology. So there was a benefit for AGI to be defined for OpenAI under that governance structure in a 1 year time frame. And now, if you listen to his most recent things, because those negotiations are going on, he's saying what we're talking about. It may take a few years, it'll evolve, the capabilities will evolve, etc. So in general, when you look at, if you look a cross sample of the top people like Sam at OpenAI, Dario at Anthropic, Demis at DeepMind, Google, and the other AI companies, the general bid-ask spread is 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 10 years.
Right. Jensen's at about 4 years.
Correct. But again, Jensen, as much as I admire him, he's probably the best technologist CEO I've ever seen in my 30 years. Remember, he benefits as much as possible for early spending on AI infrastructure for a very long time. And yeah, so
we've covered a lot of ground here. I think we're back there. Just last topic, Michael, thoughts on power energy data center.
Oh my God, this in itself is an hour. No, I love it. The general power is still, it's again, one of these real world realities in terms of scaling AI. We need more inference, more training, more data centers than ever. You saw Sam Altman, they announced ChatGPT Pro about a month ago at $200 price point. And he just said a couple of days ago, and I wrote a post about it today, where he said he said, I thought we would make money at that price point. We're losing money. And the reality is people are using the inference, even at the $200 level. And what that means is that compute is getting used. Whatever assumptions we have for data center needs today, I think are too conservative. Whatever assumptions we have for power are too conservative. And the reality is we can't build power. Even nuclear plants take 3 to 5, 10 years. As any other, Exxon just announced a carbon capture inclusive natural gas plant that has 500 to a gigawatt of power per data center. That won't actually be deployable for another, I checked, a few years. The power industry in this country, everywhere else, has been going along at 1 or 2%. On the current projections for AI, the current expectations are we need 10%, 15%, maybe 20% more power. I'm in the middle of that. I think we'll look back in 4 or 5 years, and we will see the power demands grow to maybe 5 to 10%. But I'm optimistic that with the kinds of things that we're seeing on the local AI side, the kinds of things like Jensen announced with the $3,000 digit supercomputer, we're going to see more of some of the new inference needs and the AI needs be done locally, which means it takes the load off the big data centers. And I'm hoping that mitigates somewhat the power demand pressures, because the power cannot be built as fast as one would like. They're not months, it's years. And the data centers take many months and sometimes 2 or 3 years. And then the models to train them and so on, each one of them is at least a 1 to 2 year cycle of pre-training, safeguard building, and all of that. So these are all multi-year curves, but they're still up and to the right.
Well, energy production is the future. Small modular reactors are part of that. We're not going to see that anytime soon, but we are seeing nuclear deals that are getting done, right? Microsoft, Coastal Energy, looking to do one. I think the big winner here are the independent power producers in the utilities category, because they can sell power and they're not regulated on price controls. And so the players there are, of course, Constellation Energy. We own Talon Energy, and these stocks have done incredibly. Talon is up 230 bananas, right? By the way, if you look at the valuations, they're actually not outrageous. But then there's 4 independent power producers that are probably, Vistra Energy is another one. ST, but this has been a category that's done pretty well and is going to probably benefit under the current administration.
And that's one of the hopes that the current administration,
The Trump administration.
I mean, sorry, the new one, the new administration to come, correct?
Yes, yes. Great. We covered a lot of ground. Any concluding thoughts? Thank you, Michael. It's always a marathon.
No, this has been wonderful. I think we've covered a lot of ground, etc. The underlying conclusions is everything we've seen, and I keep saying this, everything I've seen in my professional career in technology for the last 30 plus years was a dress rehearsal for what's about to happen. Just the things that we've been talking about, even at the end about the biohacking and the non-invasive stuff is so open-ended. These are, and again, I would encourage everyone to think about this as not a zero-sum game. NVIDIA losing if someone does a proprietary chip, etc. This stuff is so early and so open-ended that we don't have to, I think, worry for the most part, worry about zero-sum for most of these big companies for quite a while. And so if you're looking at all of this stuff, look at it as a portfolio. There will be major volatility, ups and downs. None we've said is financial advice. It's just that what you're hearing, I think, in our discussion is our enthusiasm for the secular developments under all these technologies, which are just barely beginning to happen. And that's the excitement. And we see technical paths why this stuff is going to grow faster rates than Moore's Law for at least 5 to 10 years. And that's what's very interesting here.
Well said. How can people follow you, Michael, to learn more? You've got the Substack, comes out every day.
Yeah, michaelparek.substack.com is the way you can just sign up for free. It's a daily thing. I've done it now for 595 days. And then I tweet. I do these wonderful chats with you and YouTube and so on. I'm pretty much out there.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it. Until next time, be well. Let's make it a great 25.
You too. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful new year. Thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening in on the episode. Remember, in the world of investing, the road less traveled often leads to the greatest rewards. I'm Ram Alawalia, your host and Chief Investment Officer at Lubita Wealth, where we specialize in the craft of alternative investments. Invest wisely, stay ahead of the curve, and stay consensus.